From Barcelona to Benfica, there are some teams who seem to have been ultra competitive and successful since their very inception. The world of football is an ever-changing landscape though, and over the years, minnows have risen and giants have fallen. Within a decade, AC Milan went from being the best team in Europe, boasting the likes of Kaká, Cafu and Maldini, to mid-table obscurity with Jeremy Menez as their top scorer. Within that same period, but over an even shorter time span, Leicester City went from playing in League One with Steve Howard up top to winning a Premier League title with future Ballon d'Or nominees like N'Golo Kante and Riyad Mahrez in their ranks. Today's video is all about football clubs who were at one time among the biggest and most successful in their countries, if not continents, who are no longer competitive at the highest level with a focus on how their demise came about. I'll only be including clubs who won major silverware at one time and are now no longer top-flight clubs, with most having fallen much further than that. Here are 7 fallen footballing giants. What happened? Vasas. We kickstart this 7 with a club not many subscribers to this channel will even have heard of, except for our small but loyal following in Hungary of course. Vasas are a fascinating football club who played a key role in Hungary's golden generation, enjoying their greatest success in the 1950s and 60s. Hungary weren't just dominant in the international game during the 1950s, their club sides were forces to be reckoned with as well. The Mitropa Cup, which was the precursor to the European Cup in many respects, was won by more Hungarian teams than teams from any other nation, and it was won by Vasas more times than it was by any other club. Vasas won the Mitropa Cup 6 times, more than double that of any other club, in addition to winning 6 Hungarian League titles, 4 Hungarian Cups, and later reaching the semi-finals of the European Cup. Vasas also played exhibition games during tours of nations every summer, famously going 20 years without tasting defeat. Their defeat would be an unusual one, which I might make a video about that around 3 people will watch at some stage. Whilst the demise of Vasas as a European force largely coincided with the demise of Hungarian football in general, something which I have already made a video about, Vasas have suffered a domestic decline far greater than that of their fellow Budapest giants like Ferencváros, MTK and Honvéd. Vasas's last league title came in 1977 and their final Hungarian Cup win came in 1986. By the mid-1980s, Vasas had ceased to compete at the top end of the table, a decline that continued into the 1990s. In 2006, Vasas was spared from relegation despite their league performance as Ferencváros were relegated due to financial irregularities, but it only delayed the inevitable. Vasas were relegated for the first time in the 2011-12 season, and they have yo-yoed between the first and second tiers ever since, currently in 3rd place in Hungary's 2nd division. FC Wacker Innsbruck. Innsbruck is the 5th largest city in Austria, and FC Wacker Innsbruck are a team that had a rather speedy rise and an equally rapid demise. Founded in 1915, the club didn't reach Austria's top flight until 1964. Then known as the A-Liga, and now known as the Austrian Bundesliga, despite their later rival, Wacker Innsbruck were to make quite the splash. The club dominated Austrian football during the 1970s, winning 5 league titles, 5 Austrian Cups, and 2 Mitropa Cups, recording wins against the likes of Celtic, Borussia Mönchengladbach, and Real Madrid in the process. Wacker came down hard right at the start of the following decade though, suffering relegation in 1981. By the end of the decade, Wacker had been stripped of their league licence and forced to start over again in the 8th tier. However, the team who took their licence, FC Swarovski Tyrol, were dissolved in 1992, with their licence returned to Wacker, who took their place in the Austrian Bundesliga and even in the UEFA Cup. It would be a brief return though, as the club were relegated from the Austrian Bundesliga and battered by Roma in the UEFA Cup, and in 1993 they were stripped of their licence once again, which went to new club FC Tyrol Innsbruck. Neither team exists anymore, with Wacker having folded in 1999 whilst competing in the 7th tier, and Tyrol Innsbruck having been liquidated in 2002. The region is now represented in Austria's Bundesliga by WSG Swarovski Tyrol, who won promotion to Austria's top flight last season. Wanderers. Every team to have won England's top flight is still in the EFL, although some have fallen as far as the 3rd and 4th tiers, and I could have featured the likes of Sunderland, Ipswich Town and Portsmouth in this video. I chose to go back a little further to the earliest dominant force in the English game, and that was London-based outfit Wanderers. Between 1872 and 1878, Wanderers played in 6 of a possible 9 FA Cup finals, and they won every single final they reached. At a time when the ruling classes also ran football, which had been created within the public school system, Wanderers ruled the roost. The club was made up of the best former pupils from a variety of different fee-paying schools, giving them the edge over teams like the Old Etonians and Old Carthusians, who only drew upon former pupils from single schools. During the 1880s, many Wanderers players decided to represent their old school teams, meanwhile working class teams from the north of England took over the FA Cup. Wanderers were reduced to playing only an annual game against Harrow up until 1887, when they folded. The club was reformed in 2009 in order to fundraise for UNICEF, and they currently compete in the Surrey South Eastern Combination Junior Division 2, which is the 16th tier of English football. In spite of that fact, Wanderers have still won the FA Cup the same number of times as Everton. If you want to learn more about that era of English football, you can check out my video about the Netflix series The English Game. RC Roubaix. There are a handful of clubs, such as Queen's Park in Scotland, who were very competitive up until the advent of professionalism, at which point they were left behind as relics of a bygone era. RC Roubaix, located in the relatively small city of Roubaix in the north of France on the Belgian border, were the team to beat in France during the 1900s. 4 different Paris clubs were all vying for the title during the first decade of the century, but Roubaix routinely saw off the challenges of all 4. Founded in 1895, between 1902 and 1908, Roubaix lifted 5 out of a possible 7 league titles, with Galliot Club Paris and RC Paris lifting the other 2. Professionalism was introduced to the French game officially in 1932, and RC Roubaix reached consecutive Coupe de France finals in 1932 and 1933. They lost both games, losing the 1933 final to cross-city rivals Excelsior Roubaix, who had already turned professional, which prompted Roubaix to turn professional themselves. After World War II, the club went through a string of mergers, almost all of whom now ceased to exist, and RC Roubaix folded themselves in 1965 due to financial problems. Lokomotive Leipzig. If any of you are ever asked the question, who were the first German football champions, the answer is Lokomotive Leipzig, although they were known as VfB Leipzig at the time. In fairness, it's quite a tough question. I think any reasonable question master would accept Lokomotive or VfB Leipzig. Personally, I'd probably just accept Leipzig. Anyhow, having been founded in 1893, VfB Leipzig actually beat a team of German Jews based in Prague to win the first German championship, and a second and third title followed in 1906 and 1913. VfB were less competitive following the restructuring of German football by the Third Reich, although they did reach a DFB Pokal final in 1936. The club was disbanded during the post-war years, but returned amid the reorganisation of East German football in 1965 as FC Lokomotive Leipzig. Like all East German clubs, Lokomotive was sponsored by a state-run company, the East German Railways in their case, and they became competitive once again. They won 3 East German Cups, narrowly missing out on the league title, and falling to a Marco van Basten goal against Ajax in the 1987 European Cup Winners' Cup final. Following reunification, Lokomotive became VfB Leipzig once again, climbing as high as the second Bundesliga before facing bankruptcy and being dissolved. The club was refounded in 2003 though as FC Lokomotive Leipzig, and they now compete in the Regionalliga Nordost, Germany's 4th tier, and are managed by the brilliantly named Wolfgang Wolf, who previously managed Wolfsburg. Alumni. You only need to look at the first 2 champions of Argentine football, St Andrews and Old Caledonians, to know that it was the Scottish who brought football to that part of South America. Alexander Watson Hutton is the Glasgow native who is hailed as the father of Argentinian football, and he founded Alumni Athletic Club in 1898. Alumni won 10 out of a possible 12 Argentine titles between 1900 and 1911, the season in which the squad ceased to compete, which came almost a decade before Boca Juniors won their first league title. The alumni team was made up of Argentine-born players of British descent, including their star trio, Thomas, Carlos and George Brown, all of Scottish descent. Having won their 10th league title in little more than a decade in 1911, Alumni missed their first 3 games of the 1912 season and withdrew from the league. The team donated most of their earnings to charity, and as such, they faced financial struggles. The team was officially disbanded in 1913, although the group of players sometimes met up to play friendly games, with many of them going on to join Quilmes, who had a lot of players of British descent as well. Quilmes won the 1912 title and a second in 1978, and they now compete in Argentina's second tier. Alumni were reformed in 1951, but only as a rugby league team, and they still compete in Argentina's top 12, the nation's top flight of domestic rugby league. Pro Vercelli. This list is obviously in no particular order, but Pro Vercelli are in many respects the ultimate fallen giant. Founded in 1892, Pro Vercelli didn't dominate the very first years of Italian football, that would be Genoa, but they came into a world of their own before and after the First World War. Between 1908 and 1922, Vercelli won 7 league titles, tying Genoa's record as the most successful football club in the country. In 1926, professionalism came into the Italian game though, and larger, more industrial cities began to take the sport seriously. Vercelli is roughly equidistant between Milan and Turin, and it was the clubs in these two cities who would take over during the 1930s. Pro Vercelli players dominated Vittorio Pozzo's first Italy squad for the 1912 Olympics with 7 players, falling to 3 players in 1920, 2 in 1924, and none by the time the 1934 World Cup came along. It was in the 1934-35 season that the club were relegated from Serie A for the first time, never to return. Pro Vercelli have since fluctuated between the 3rd and 4th tiers of Italian football, and they were fighting to avoid the relegation playoffs in Group A of Serie C when Italian football was suspended, currently managed by former Italian international Alberto Gilardino. So that's it for today's video. Thank you all for watching, give us a like if you enjoyed it, let us know your thoughts in the comments along with any video ideas, and obviously make sure that you're subscribed to HITC Sevens.